I mean, I was a really low bottom drunk, as I say. I didn't have any friends when I got sober. One of my family members was speaking to me. I didn't have a job. I had married this guy I'd only known for a couple of weeks. My life was in shambles. And then I get sober, and there's this whole other life out there. And it's really rich for the taking.
I heard it through the grapevine. Welcome. It's the AA Grapevine half-hour variety hour, featuring the collected voices of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm Don, an alcoholic in Greensboro, North Carolina.
Howdy, Don. Hey, everybody, I'm Sam, an alcoholic in Palm Springs, California.
Hiya, Sam.
What's happening?
Did you ever see your alcoholism from the pain that you were causing other loved ones while you were drinking?
Absolutely not. I mean, I didn't hurt anybody. Are you kidding?
That's what I said when my very first meeting. I came home and told my wife, I don't know, they were talking about making amends. I don't know what this is about. I was always a happy drunk.
And then you found out differently.
Yes. And as I got sober, I began to see, how much I really was affecting the others around me. And, I remember one incident as a father when my son was 2 years old. Now, I got sober when he was 6, but he was 2 years old and he had earaches all the time. And I was trying not to be an alcoholic, but it wasn't going very well.
That didn't work.
It's controlled drinking, and I was trying to control it every single day. But every single night, I had to start drinking, and I drank every night without fail. I could not wait till at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock when I got off work. That's what I was doing at that time. His earaches would come late at night, always. He had a real big problem with this. And he just started screaming in pain, which meant that my wife would go take care of him, and she would call me and send me to the 24-hour drugstore to pick up his pain medicine for him. And I would be drunk because I was always drunk at night. I remember one time when he started crying, and I was in my studio painting and drinking and drunk. And I thought, no, I can't believe he's doing this to me. I'm going to have to go drive. I'm going to get arrested, and I'm going to lose my license over this. And it was ugly. And my next thought was, what kind of person are you that this is the way you think when your son is crying in pain? It was painful to see in myself, but it was plain as day. I mean, and I was going, I've got to go get the pain medicine. I don't have a choice. I hope I don't get arrested. And I didn't. When I got sober, I remember sharing that with my sponsor, and he said, hang on to that.
Yeah. And the thing is, at the time, that wasn't enough to get you sober.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. That's what's the dumbfounding thing about alcoholism, is that I had to drink no matter this precious boy that I loved so dearly. That wasn't enough to keep me from drinking.
I've got Thanksgiving at my grandmother's house. I was hungover big time, waited and waited and waited till the last minute to go. And when I got there, I realized I can't do this. And I went inside and I kissed her on the cheek and said, Happy Thanksgiving. I can't stay, and turned right around and left. That was not an unusual occurrence for me to leave early, show up late, not be present while I was there.
Right.
Because it was either I was hungover or I was looking for the next drink. And then the other thing that popped into my head, something really bad happening, and it still wasn't enough. My husband and I were both drinking. We were both drunks. And I had my hands around his neck This is a total blackout. The only way I know this is because he told me. But I woke up the next morning and there was a really painful thing going on with my back. And I asked him what had happened. I had my hands around his throat and he punched me in the stomach and I raked my back down the corner of the counter. And I could have killed this man and not even known it and not known it was me. But that was not enough for me to stop drinking. So I definitely hurt people that I loved in my drinking days, and it still wasn't enough to stop.
Right. Thank goodness there's a solution. I mean, I did not want to go to AA, but when I went to AA, and I was whipped, I came to AA saying, show me how to do this. I cannot do it anymore. I exhausted every avenue that I could think of besides AA. And so I was ready and it worked. And I'm so grateful I don't have to live like that anymore.
Doing it someone else's way is the only way that has worked for me.
Yeah, it's a better way to live. What's happening today?
Today's guest is Vicky C.
Sam, how can people send us a question for the old timer?
Don, the easiest way to do that is just to pick up the phone and call 212-870-3418 and you record your message. That's 212-870-3418.
Hi, everyone. I am Vicky C. I'm an alcoholic. I'm from Virginia Beach, Virginia, and my home group is Indian River 12-Step Study Group.
Hey, Vicky, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm glad you're here, Vicky. When did you get sober?
I got sober January 22nd, 1990.
What was going on with you when you got sober that you decided that you needed to go to AA of all things?
Yeah, can you imagine? Well, I actually was introduced to AA in 1980 because the state of Maine took my child away from me in 1980. And the judge said to me, if you want to have any visitation with your child, then you will get sober, and recommended a rehab for me in Bodenham, Maine, a really small town. And so I wanted to see my child. So I went to rehab.
Were you thinking you had a problem, or were you thinking the judge was being very judgy?
Oh, very judgy. Although I knew that I had a problem. I knew that I was an alcoholic. I didn't care that I was an alcoholic. I didn't want to get sober. I wanted really nothing to do with a sober life, but I wanted to see my daughter, and my only option was to be sober. But, you know, it's such an insidious disease that I didn't get sober then. You know, I was in that 30-day rehab. I was going to AA meetings, but I didn't want to give up alcohol. I thought that I could fake it. Since I went to this rehab, I could pretend that I was this other person and could be an effective mother. But, you know, that didn't work.
How did that show itself? How did that not work?
Well, I was still doing everything that I did before I went to rehab. I lived with a guy that owned a bar in our town and, you know, would go to work. Sometimes I worked in a factory. I would go to work sometimes I wouldn't. And my job actually paid for me to go to this rehab. And so I had to pretend at the job as well that I was sober. And
wow, that's a lot of work.
Oh, it was so hard. It was so hard that I didn't even know how hard it was. Like, I didn't know that this other kind of life existed. You know,
now you were pretty young in all this too, weren't you?
Yeah, well, I picked up my first drink at 10. I had 3 older brothers, and I was one of 6 children, and we always referred to ourselves as feral children. We didn't really have any rules, or you know, we kind of lived in the country, and our parents didn't like children, even though they had 6 of us. And so I drank at 10 with 2 of my 3 older brothers.
10?
At 10. And do you know, by 13, I was a runaway. By 14, I was pregnant. By 15, I was married for the first time. And so in all this craziness, you know, I had this child when I was 14. I was living on the streets when I got pregnant with her. She was 5. I was 20 when the state of Maine took her away from me. But the insidiousness of the alcoholism was that I wanted to drink really more than I wanted to be a mother. Truthfully, sadly, that was the case for me. You asked what was going on in my life when I turned 30, when I picked up my white ship. I really, nothing big had happened other than I met this guy. I was in a small town in Bath, Maine, and there is a shipyard in that town. So I met this guy, and he was in the Navy, and he was 9 years younger than me. And he was getting ready to come down to Virginia Beach the next month. He was getting transferred. I said, God, I'd love to go to Virginia Beach. What do you think of getting married? To my surprise, he said yes. So I should have known that he was, he was as crazy as I was, or a lunatic, just like I was. But it was that thing where, if I go somewhere else, maybe things will be better.
That geographical cure.
That's it. Exactly. But wherever you go, you take yourself with you.
Wherever you go, there you are.
Right.
And wherever you are, there you go.
That's the truth. So I got down here in Virginia Beach, and my daughter called me. She was 14 at the time.
How old were you?
I was 30.
Did you have contact with her?
Off and on, I had contact with her. We lived in a small town in Bath, Maine. So I saw her for the first few years, but my alcoholism got so bad that for several years, we didn't see each other. We would bump into each other occasionally, downtown or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So she called me right after I had moved here and done this geographical cure. I thought that I needed to learn how to be a mother. So I called the United Way. I had no money. My husband, who I didn't know, was like an E2 or something, in the military, and I wasn't working. I called the United Way. I went to this therapist, and wouldn't you know it, she says to me, I'll work with you if you go down here. There's a meeting tonight at 5:30 and you pick up a white chip, because I really think your problem is alcoholism. And I was like, I couldn't hide it from her. And I thought I could. And what I learned was, in order to be a mother, I had to get sober. Just in order to be an active member of any society, this society, I had to get sober. So
to be able to get out of myself, I had to get sober to be able to care for someone else.
Yeah.
The oxygen masks dropping from over the airplane seats. I mean, it really is that thing. You got to put your mask on first before you can be of any help to anyone else. Yeah. We got to take care of ourselves first. We got to get our lives in order before we can show up for anyone else.
Yep. So I picked up a white chip that day, and I started talking at meetings. And this woman said to me, like 3 meetings in, she goes, shut your mouth. And do you have a sponsor? And I said,
wow.
I said, no. Yeah. And she goes, okay, well, I'm going to be your sponsor. And that was terrific. It was terrific, because I was just glommed myself onto her, and I would do anything she really wanted me to do. And then for the first time ever,
why did that change for you, that you were willing to do that and willing to accept this person saying, quit talking, listen into meetings? This is somebody telling you what to do. What changed inside of you that made you willing to do it? Because you said you just went because this person said, go to a meeting or I won't work with you.
Yeah, that is such an interesting question. I think it must have been, it might sound corny, but my higher power doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. Because seriously, until that time, my life was always chaotic. It was chaotic from the day I was born. But certainly after I picked up that drink, it got worse. I don't know. But what I do know is that when I walked into that meeting that day, I had a sense of belonging, which I had never felt before. And I think it was because that seed was planted when I was in rehab all those years ago. The meetings that I went to for several months afterward, I just felt at home like I had never felt before. When I clearly remember when the person read How It Works, that feeling of like being part of a fellowship. I had never been to a church. I had never belonged to any clubs. I was an 8th grade dropout in high school, so I never went to any proms or anything like that. But I felt like I belonged, I think for the first time really in my life.
Oh, wow. It's not silly at all. That is exactly what my experience of a higher power was at the beginning. which was simply this feeling came over me that I'm going to be okay and I can trust this. And where's that coming from? I didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
That sense of connection, it continues to grow throughout my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was such a lone wolf, is what I thought, until I got me drunk enough and I was alone, and then I was looking for people. So what it was all this barrier of the walls I had up around me and fear of connecting with people. And when alcohol would drop that, then, I would have whatever connection was available there. But what I have found in these rooms is true connection.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I know listening to people in the rooms when I first got sober, I remember thinking, I want what they have. My sponsor reiterated over and over, well, then you have to do what we did to get it. It doesn't just come by osmosis. It's hard work, so.
So what's something that you did at the very beginning there with the sponsor, and you're connected to AA for the first time and you're staying sober?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What was something that you did that seemed like they were asking you to do that seemed crazy, but you did it anyway and found on the other side it wasn't crazy at all?
Well, one thing was being willing to listen without debating. Like I was a very, very argumentative person. My sponsor used to say, you have to resign from the debating society. Even though I wanted what the people in AA had, I still would say, yeah, but I was a low bottom drunk. That was my, that's what I always said, well, that person has a college education or even a high school education or whatever it was. I had to learn how to stop comparing myself out, and instead looking at the things that I had in common with these individuals, because I had always felt like an outsider. And it would have been easy for me to start feeling like an outsider in AA because I had never, like I said, never been to a church, or I'd never, sought any religious affiliation or any higher power or anything like that. And so I started doing that. Like I considered myself a diehard atheist. If you had my life, you'd be an atheist too, or you'd be an alcoholic too, or insert any, there. I just became willing to sit and be still and learn how to meditate. And that to me was huge, because it was, for the first time, I'm not trying to control myself or the outcome of something, and I was just willing to listen. I was willing to tell my sponsor about something that I was feeling like I needed to have a job, because I had already left this guy that I had married, within a few months, and I didn't have a place to live. And I was going to be homeless again. And here I am sober. It's like, oh, same old, same old. And my sponsor said, how about if you have a little bit of faith that this is going to work out? And I'm like, yeah, but I don't have a job. I don't have a place to live. How about you have a little bit of faith? I had a little bit of faith. And you know what happened? I met this girl at a party. She was in Al-Anon and she had an open room to rent. So I said, okay. So I start renting this room from her. I get a job in human resources at a local bank. Now, I'm a person who swears like a sailor. I do not know proper grammar. I didn't know that you had to wear a slip under a skirt. I didn't know anything about working in a professional environment. I'd either been I'd been a drug dealer, or I'd worked in a factory or a bar.
Mm-hmm.
So it worked out. I got this job. I got this room. I started having a relationship with that daughter. I started financially supporting her, but she ended up cutting all contact with me. It's been difficult in that she's using now like I used to use. And so we haven't seen each other in several years. But I do have a fantastic relationship with her two sons, who are my grandsons. We're actually putting one of my grandsons through college, and the other one we have a terrific relationship with as well, my husband and I.
It's hard to watch someone else go through what I went through.
Yes. Yes.
So how are you doing with that? How do you deal with it?
Well, the thing is, I'm so grateful for the 12 steps and working those steps in my life, because, I've done the steps many, many times, 1 through 12 throughout the years. And
you didn't do it just once and were completed and graduated.
I didn't find that worked for me.
It does work. Didn't
It was
work for
kind
me.
of it was kind of like those character defects just resurfaced. Not as bad, certainly I know that the promises have come through in every aspect of my life. But how I deal with it is by supporting her sons. She has no relationship with her sons. She kicked both of them out when they were teenagers. I sponsor a woman who is a mother, and I worked through it personally through the 12 steps. When I did fourth and fifth step the first time, I did go through, and my daughter certainly was on my 8-step list, and I made a 9-step amends to her. She and I went to counseling together as well. And I feel as though I did certainly make amends for the wrongs that I did to her, but that doesn't take those wrongs away. I don't still have that debilitating shame around it, because it is shameful, especially I think for women when you have lost custody of your children or your
Yes.
child. Society does have a shame about that. But I remember raising my hand at a meeting and saying, are there any other women in AA who have lost the custody of their children? And I had to do that because I was so riddled with guilt. And I was sober, so I was really feeling it. And as I met other women that had happened to as well. And I talked with them about it. And I've made living amends toward my daughter as well throughout the years, where I've treated her how I should have always treated her and reacted appropriately in situations, and I would still be there for her today if she were to get sober. But I've been there for her sons who have a lot of questions about it because they know that their mother is an alcoholic. They've talked with me about my own alcoholism and my own recovery. I do have hope that perhaps she can get sober too.
Vicki, I love this phrase, our greatest liabilities become our greatest assets. And you're using what you've been through to help people. First of all, for you to say in this interview, I'm so glad that you did, that you raised your hand and asked the room if there are other women in here who have lost custody of their children.
Willingness.
That's huge. I know that I would have been very nervous doing that. Were you nervous asking that question?
I was nervous, but shortly before that, a couple of months prior to that, I raised my hand and said, is there anyone else in here who just doesn't believe in God? And I got help with that. So I was like, oh, okay, well, that works for me.
I like your style.
Some call it Northern.
I think it's fantastic. So with our liabilities becoming our greatest assets, you definitely have this unique perspective that you can share and relate with other young women. Is there anything that you would directly want to say to someone?
I would say that there's no obstacle that cannot be overcome with openness, willingness, and honesty. It just takes reaching out to people. Nearly everything that I've ever gone through, I have been able to work through it with the help of another alcoholic. Whether that is an alcoholic that is sponsoring me or someone in my home group or a counselor. I went to in-person counseling when I was a few years sober to deal with childhood issues that I didn't talk about in the rooms. There were certain things that I felt like I needed to get help outside of, or the one-on-one, with a counselor. And that was one of the ways that I worked through. And that was a spiritual thing as well. But that coupled with doing the steps, having a sponsor, having a regular AA meetings that I went to and still go to, there was nothing that I have found that was insurmountable. And just being that willingness, I think, being willing to tell people instead of saying when people say, how are you? Instead of saying, okay, I'm all right, I'm fine. If someone in AA is asking you that, you have permission to say, I'm dealing with this and I need help with this. So.
Bingo. Oh, you have permission to say, you have permission to speak the truth instead of looking good and saying I'm fine.
Yes, exactly. I did things like my best friend, he and I are still best friends after 32 years. But when I was like 6 months sober, he and I went to a local detention center and he and I started an AA meeting and a bunch of people started. We did that meeting for several years. And it was another way to make amends to my daughter as well.
So you've got, what was it, 32 years?
I had 32 in January.
Okay. What is your week like as far as AA goes? How does AA come into play?
Well, AA touches my life actually every day because every morning when I wake up, I have a couple of books that I read. And I also keep a 12 and 12 in my purse. I have a pocket size 12 and 12 because I have people in AA who will call me throughout the week. And so I always make sure that I have my book there. My home group is on Monday nights, and I do that in person. And we do the 12 and 12. We go through the big book and we do a tradition the third Monday of every month. I also do things like Friday night, I had phone watch, so I didn't get much sleep here Friday night. I also, on Tuesday nights, I have another meeting, which I go to on Zoom. I've been doing that for almost 2 years, and it's my other home group. And then I usually meet with one of the women that I'm sponsoring sometime during the week. I talk with people on the phone, and then I will go to another meeting throughout the week. Since I'm retired, which the promises came true for me, and so I was able to retire earlier than normal. And,
Goodness gracious, isn't that a miracle?
Well, I've had a largely successful relationship and marriage for 27 years too. And that was, I was 4 years sober when Michael and I started dating. So that helped as well. But because I'm retired, I can go to a daytime meeting or an evening meeting or a Zoom meeting. So I feel like the life I have today, I owe to AA. So I owe it to give back to AA as well.
Isn't that a little too much AA?
No, your life is just it's your life is shot through with AA in the right way. I love that. It's fantastic. I mean, it's just to go through my life, and recovery is a part of it.
Yes.
It's just that simple.
Well, I tell you, I can be a little bit hard-headed, as I said. And one time there was a few month period where I didn't make AA a priority like I have always, except for this one short period of time. And I'm telling you, I mean, my life didn't go to pot, but my head did. And I learned some great lessons during that time. And it was, a few months. And so being plugged into AA, I know works for me. And I know people who got sober and then never came back to meetings. I know people who go to meetings every day. That's the wonderful thing about this program, other than the fact that it's the only group I can think of that really wants everyone to succeed. Like, I've never heard anyone say, I want him to drink, We want everyone to succeed. So how can we not want to be part and be grateful? I'm eternally grateful for what I have. And really, what I have is as a result of AA. I feel so lucky. After the life I had until I was 30. And then I feel like I woke up and I was like, oh, wow, I feel reborn. That was it.
Vicki, I'm so glad that we got to know you today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I always appreciate the opportunity for service.
Now, if we're going to work together, you need to be perfectly honest. Tell me about your life.
Well, I'm engaged in a major double custody battle.
How's that?
Well, my wife doesn't want me, and my mother won't take me back. It's really not that funny. Thanks for joining us. The AA Grapevine Half-Hour Variety Hour is posted every Monday and is produced by AA Grapevine, Inc. We don't speak for AA as a whole. We share the experience, strength, and hope of members to help others recover from alcoholism. Podcast info, including how to call in, is at aagrapevine.org/podcast. Find AA Grapevine on Instagram and the AA Grapevine channel on YouTube. All things Grapevine are available at aagrapevine.org. If you want to know more about AA, Google Alcoholics Anonymous and your city, or visit aa.org.